talk. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford. I'm the founder of the London Java community and also run a recruitment company called RecWorks. So here at RecWorks, we try to find ways that recruitment can be a force for good in the tech industry beyond just getting people jobs. So it all came about years ago when I realized I was spending all of my time speaking to Java developers within London, and it was always people relocating into the place, people that have been there for ages, but always people in this same sort of small industry. So I started thinking if we could use my position to do good within the industry, and that's really been the concept that I've been playing with for about the last 12 years now. And the LJC is one thing that's grown out of that. So we tend to spend our time looking at ways we can bring people together for mentoring, learning, coaching, career development, that kind of thing, and all try and do it all for free and use the revenue that comes from recruitment to drive the whole thing. So that's basically what this is all about. So the latest groups that we've put together, the latest kind of initiatives are trying to catch people that are on a similar journey somewhere. So people on a similar learning path. So we've got a few groups, aspiring CTOs, one that's for like interim CTOs, and also aspiring speakers. So the aspiring speakers group, basically we've seen the success of so many people within the LJC that have started giving their first talks, like generally a lightning talk, generally petrified to give the first talk, and then gone on to just insane success, like keynoting all around the world, and careers that have gone off the back of it, companies that have been started and now sold to companies like Microsoft off the back of relationships that have come off of this. So the aspiring speakers is an attempt to make this more of a kind of a conveyor belt, to keep evangelizing this concept of getting into speaking. And then helping the people that want to overcome hurdles that they might see along the way. So that's what the whole thing is about. The event today is part of that, which is basically just a chance to practice and get feedback. I will say not all the speakers are first-time speakers. In fact, we've got a really good lineup today. So some of them are new, some of them are more experienced, but that's a bit of background as to what this is all about. So if anybody wants to hear more about the recruitment side of things, then feel free to look me up afterwards on LinkedIn. So after we've done the lightning talks, we're going to then go over to a bit of a Q&A with Martin and Simon Maple, who have been in the LJC for many, many years and are the reasons why it's been so successful. So yeah, so we'll talk about that a bit more in a bit. So right, Helen, are you ready? Are you out there? You okay if I hand over to you now?
Yep, absolutely.
Brilliant. All right. Helen Scott then, on Oracle LTS releases and what they mean for you.
All right. Since we've practiced the tech, it's going to work flawlessly because that's the rule. How are we doing? We good? Nice. Awesome. Okay, so my name is Helen Scott and I'm returning to Java after 20 years in various other roles within the development industry. So since I'm returning to Java, I started researching the changes in the Java world since 2000. And I came across this notion of these specific long-term support releases from Oracle, and they were new to me and I was kind of intrigued by them. So this presentation is a summary of what I found out and why businesses might actually quite like them. So to start with, let's take a look at the Java release history to date. All right, so we know Java's 25 years old this year. It's had a fairly turbulent childhood. It changed ownership some 15 years after its inception when Oracle acquired Sun Microsystems and thus Java. And then it had some fairly substantial architectural changes courtesy of Oracle, some of which were quite scary for the wider Java community. So up until Java 9 in 2017, we had what I'm calling fixed scope, flexible cadence. So you can see that on the left-hand side. The releases were quite sporadic, they were quite spaced out. Sometimes it was 2 years between releases, sometimes it was 5. We didn't necessarily know what we were getting or when we were getting it. We then had the acquisition and there was the period of settling, and we moved to something that I'm calling this flexible scope fixed cadence, largely because of the foundations that Oracle themselves laid. So we can see from the cluster of releases on the right-hand side, we now get a release of Java every 6 months. It's like clockwork, it will be there. They are arguably smaller increments to the Java specifications when we do get these releases, but we know what we're getting, and we know when we're getting them. It was around this time that Oracle came out with this notion of long-term support, or LTS releases as well. So those are shown in purple on the timeline. So Oracle made the following statement about these, and I'll quote it. They said, for product releases after Java SE 8, Oracle will designate a release every 3 years as a long-term support release. So that was kind of interesting to me, because up until then, every release of Java was effectively an LTS release. And I was like, well, what does it mean? Are they special? Oracle gave themselves a little bit of wiggle room with this as well, in terms of the every 3 years statement. I've called it Java SE 17. It might not be, it doesn't really matter. The point is that you'll get something called, or Oracle will designate a release every 3 years as a long-term support release. So now we know kind of when they're coming, what's the purpose of them? So the purpose of them is they're only really useful when you combine them with two other things. So the first thing that you need to combine a long-term support release is something called the Oracle Java SE subscription. It's what it sounds like. It's money, you pay it annually, and you pay it to Oracle. That's the first thing you need. The second thing you need is the Oracle JDK. This is one of 2 JDKs that Oracle themselves produce. This one is licensed by Oracle. So when you combine a Java long-term support release with an Oracle Java SE subscription and the Oracle JDK specifically, you get support from Oracle, fixes from Oracle, for the duration of something called the Premier Support Date. The Premier Support Date is a date that Oracle specify, and that is for the long-term support releases. That is 3 years from when the release is first delivered, born. They will support it for 3 years. They will only support the interim Java releases, the non-LTS releases, for 6 months. You also, as an added bonus, get to use the Oracle JDK for commercial use, which you get with the Java SE subscription. So what does that mean for your business? It means that your business can have stability. It means you can stay on the same version of the Oracle JDK for a 3-year duration, providing you take an LTS release and you have an Oracle Java SE subscription and using the Oracle JDK. You will get fixes from Oracle throughout this time, including those that go into future Java releases. So those interim non-LTS, those green releases, you'll get the fixes if you're using an Oracle LTS release, paying the subscription, using an Oracle JDK. It gives businesses stability. It allows the Java release cycle to move much faster whilst businesses have that stability. Now, I do think it's really important to call out at this point that this presentation has focused on Oracle purely because I was doing a bunch of research. This notion of these Oracle LTS releases came up and I went down a rabbit hole that turned into a rabbit warren and various other holes. There are plenty of other vendors out there producing JDKs. Most of them, I think, have followed suit. They've fallen in step with this cycle from Oracle of every 3 years you will get a long-term support release. But equally, they have their own support model. It's not the same as Oracle's. It differs in cost, it differs in support. It might have other variations that you need to consider. So this presentation has just focused on Oracle, but I did want to call out that there are other vendors that are producing JDKs and they have their own support as well. So these are all the resources that I looked at when I was seeking to understand what an Oracle LTS release was. There's tons. They're on my website or that QR code. And if I haven't completely overrun, I think I might have a minute left for questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Helen. Anyone out there got a question for Helen on the presentation?
I've got to say, having Simon here has made me really nervous.
It's the same for me every time I see him. Mag, I see you've unmuted there. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question. I'm not an Oracle expert, but with the LTS cycle and then the releases all the way, like from my front-end experience of updating packages and all those codependencies, how much of a problem can that be within all the interim releases and how other things might need to feed into that? Is it the same sort of thing?
I don't know the answer to that question. I could take a guess in that it's yes. Does anybody else on the call have any insight to that? Perhaps more experienced developers.
So could you repeat the question again? I didn't catch that.
So, Simon, you weren't listening to me clearly. I did not have your attention.
I was typing in the chat and I missed the first bit. Sorry.
So basically, I'm a front-end developer specializing in Angular, and obviously, you know, in the world of packages, and that's the way I can kind of relate this LTS release. In those interim releases, there can be a nightmare when we upgrade something and then everything else that's dependent on that might be out of sync. How does that work in the Oracle LTS release cycle?
So from what I understand, the LTS and non-LTS releases are all production-ready releases. So you should be able to upgrade from whether it's an LTS or I can't remember if they still call them feature releases, I think, and LTS releases or something like that. So historically, Java release changes haven't really broken too much in the interim. It's more about whether frameworks can build on top and support the new features. However, more recently, that hasn't necessarily been the case because hence the hashtags like working fine on JDK 9 and so forth, because it's more and more the case whereby frameworks have to kind of like build on top of some of the changes. But I feel like going forward, I don't think that's necessarily going to be a big problem. We have Martijn here as well, and Trish. Look, they can kind of like maybe add some more to that.
I wanted to say something briefly, which is me.
Oh,
yes.
God.
Uh-oh, sorry, Barry.
My comment would be more that my recommendation is to update dependencies first before updating versions of Java rather than the other way around. And that will solve a bunch of problems. And the other good thing is that Java being highly backwards compatible, generally speaking, that's quite a good way to do stuff because things will carry on working when you update your version of Java anyway, in theory.
Cool. Okay, well, that was very well answered. And Helen, you look like you have a whole posse of experts along with you. So
Yes, great. Thank you both.
Brilliant. Yeah,
Amazing.
awesome. Thank you.
Also, Trisha just managed to log in. I think there was a problem with Zoom, Helen, so you might need to do it again so she can catch it. So
Honestly.
Right.
Thanks for that, Barry.
No worries. Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you, Sai,
you.
and Mag and Trisha there as well for the responses. One thing I will say, Dom, would you mind posting? There you go. Amazing. There's a feedback form in the chat. If you could leave any feedback for Helen there, that would be fantastic. So even if it's just multiple choice, to quickly sort of point out any of the bits that you enjoyed, any other notes as well. We'll put this out after each presentation. But when people are relatively early in their speaking journey, feedback is just so important to help steer, and words of encouragement are so powerful. So anything you can do there would be great. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Krystian. So Krystian's going to be speaking on using psychology in day-to-day social interactions. Krystian, when you're ready.
Thank you. So I'm just getting my slides up now. Oh. Okay, perfect. So this is obviously one talk in a series of talks on psychology. Today I thought I'd focus on stories and the narratives, specifically why and how do they work on people. The talk itself was inspired by our fellow speaker today, Karsten, who about a month ago said something very interesting. He mentioned that he doesn't really like the idea of embedding stories within presentations. He himself much prefers to be presented with a problem and then a solution. Today, I'm going to play the devil's advocate in that I'm going to tell you why stories are powerful, not just for your presentations, but also day-to-day lives. So we're going to go quite generic, and then we're going to narrow down with this. So what if I told you that stories got you exactly where you are right now with your life? Think of job interviews that you've had. Think of the other narratives that the world around you is trying to put on you. Think of news articles, adverts, the way that they target their consumers. Think of presentations, perhaps politicians. We all hear very bold, very specific, very short narratives. Brexit means Brexit. Make America great again. They're very simple narratives that gather information around them. They're easy to digest, easy to repeat, and they stick within our heads. And another thing is businesses. Think of companies like Apple or even just banks in general. Banks used to be these very formal entities that used to just hold your money for you. Now they're not just banks. They're so much more than just formal entities. They're your friends. They will secure you. They will provide you with security. They're friendly. There's a whole new side to this. So you might be wondering, why are we so attracted to stories, and why do we have them pushed on us from all around us? And this is where I invite you to look at an awesome study by Haider and Simmel. What they did is they just showed people a bunch of shapes, and they got the circle to follow the triangle, and they asked people what they saw. Amazingly, people started to describe the scene as, oh, the circle was chasing the triangle. They started associating it with human emotions. They were saying that the circle was perhaps bullying the triangle as it was smaller. And again, between us, these are nothing more than just shapes. So what this served to demonstrate is that we are biologically inclined to seek stories, to construct narratives, and it just makes the information a lot easier to digest. Now, what else makes a good story? Obviously, it's when it's packed with emotion. Again, there's a range of studies that show that things such as feelings such as fear, anger, disgust, and happiness are universal across the world. And essentially, the reason why that is we've got brain regions that are specialized in processing them. There's just more activation when we're presented with something that is emotional versus something that is relatively cut and dried. This is why it's so easy to remember an awesome plot twist within a film, but so difficult to study for an exam or remember a bunch of facts. There's just more brain activation in our heads, and it's just easier to digest. Now, what that leads us on to is another cool feature of our brain, specifically the way that we memorize information and the way we recall it. Now, a good story will provide us with a narrative. It will provide the information with a structure. And our brains happen to learn through associations. We've all been in a situation where we're trying to recall something, a specific memory or an information. It's called the tip of the tongue effect. We're trying to recall it. We couldn't, despite our greatest efforts to. Then our friends tells us something, and it instantly activates it within our head. It instantly triggers it, and we suddenly remember it. This is why it's so easy to remember related words, but it's so difficult to think of some very random words. So if I give you a word guitar, you might think musician, you might think instruments, you might think lyrics, but it's so difficult to come up with something completely random. As I said, a good story provides a frame for the information. This is why it's a lot more persuasive for your story for example, if you talk about the world hunger, why it's so much better to, rather than presenting your audience with raw facts and figures, to perhaps present them with a story of a certain family across the world that has been struggling for a while, and then sprinkle in the numbers and figures. Numbers and figures just don't stick with our minds very well. They don't have much to grip onto. So remember to practice these things, and next time you construct a presentation or a story, remember, make it emotional, put a lot of framing around it, especially if it's a specialist topic. And what you find out is, if you don't try to hard sell the story, but you put your point across as almost like a moral, it works to implant the information within your audience's heads. Because biologically, again, because we're sort of used to constructing stories and interpreting the information as stories, we're more willing to accept information that comes in the form of a story. And a great illustration of this, perhaps not related to psychology or Java in particular, but you should read Animal Farm. This was recommended by my friend Konstantin. Uses a bunch of metaphors and a lot of just interesting adjectives to give you loads of useful life lessons. It talks also a lot about politics, so it's definitely a good read and a good demonstration of this effect. And that is all for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krystian. That was great. Does anyone have any questions on any part of that for Krystian?
Yeah, sure. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So Krystian, do you think the brain's best interest is to make links, and so everything it does leads to that effect?
So it's one way that we remember things. So again, when you learn anything, think of our brains just to link things. Whenever you think of something, the way that information is stored within your brain, mostly only the associated information will light up within your brain and will become available. That's why when you're learning something new, like a new topic or a new field, it's so difficult to memorize things. The information almost has no space or no specific location to be saved within your brain. Once you learn a field or you learn a topic, there's more for your brain. There's more space for your brain to categorize information, which makes it easier to remember and recall. So it's a really interesting effect. So if you want to learn anything, associate it with a lot of stuff and you'll find that it's a lot easier to remember. Again, this is why it's easier to remember a gist of something rather than specific tiny information that could be very ambiguous.
Great tip, thank you.
Thank you very much, Krystian. Thank you, Konstantin, for the question. Just a quick reminder about the feedback. Please do keep leaving it. Thank you. I know we've had a bit. Thanks to Kabir and Luis already for their feedback, but please do keep it coming. And we'd really like some feedback for this man that's coming up, Simon Maple, for his next presentation. Are you all set there, Si, ready to go?
All good, yeah.
All good. Okay. All right. Well, you should be a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen. So take it away when you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So yeah, I didn't prepare for this as well as I could have done. So I'm just going to do 5 minutes of an existing session that I already have, which is normally about an hour. But this is called Stranger Danger. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides and then we're going to do a quick live hack of an application. So when we think about your application, the application you actually write, there's going to be code you write and code that you try and pull in from outside sources, open source projects, libraries. And this is amazing. This is great. This ratio between the code you write and the code you pull in is amazing as well, because we can write a very small amount of code and use some amazing libraries like Angular that was mentioned earlier, and a whole bunch of Java libraries as well. And it's great because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now this piece of purple code here that you'd write would be in IntelliJ, and I'll leave that there. So here is just a piece of Node code. We're gonna pick on Node today. Here's a serverless example. That serverless example has 2 direct dependencies from 19 lines of code. I'm going to ask people in the Zoom chat just to estimate how many indirect dependencies they think exist in this application. So this is just an NPM Node application with a number of dependencies which we're going to be pulling in. How many total? 300, says Kabir. Not quite that many. Oh, 880 from Helen. 80 was closer. So we have 19 total dependencies. So that's 17 transitive dependencies, 2 direct dependencies. Apologies if you can hear my dog yawning in the background. How many full lines of code do you think we're actually going to be deploying as our serverless application now? So 19 lines of code in our IDE, almost certainly IntelliJ, 300,000, 200,000, almost perfect, 191,000 lines of code. So the thing to take away here is the code that you need to maintain and secure is the code that is deployed, not the code in your wonderful IDE. So let's go terminal actually to perform a quick hack. If I was to jump over to my environment here, in my next 3 minutes, we're going to show you an application. I'm going to show you a vulnerability and then we're going to exploit it. So here, this is just a regular to-do application. I can buy some milk. I can buy some beer. I can buy whatever I want. I just need to type it. How good's that? Beer. Oops, buy beer. Okay, this is my application. There's also an about page. If I can click that, there's an about page there being served from the public directory. Now, I've already scanned an application. This is everything I show you here is free, so this isn't a pitch. Here's an application that I've already scanned. I can see a bunch of a bunch of dependencies, and I have picked a certain vulnerability that I am going to hack, which is coming from the ST library. The ST library is one that serves static code. Now I could click on this to fix that vulnerability. That will open a fix pull request like this, and you can see the actual fix is upgrading your dependency and making sure you're on upgraded dependencies, whether that's free of security vulnerabilities or just on latest, is the thing that we're trying to get to that state here. We want to make sure that what we pull in is, what we actually put into production is what we are maintaining and what we're securing. So my question then is, how are we going to secure this? Well, we can see this is being served in the public directory. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to go over to my terminal, and I'm going to, let's curl this endpoint here. You can see that this is just being served, the about HTML being served from that public directory. I'm going to now try and do a directory traversal. Directory traversal is just trying to break out of the directory that we are currently in. So here we have access to this public directory. directory, and we're going to try and break out of that. If I do a // that is a directory traversal, but the ST library is a library that is there to serve static files. It should know what a directory traversal is, and it recognizes the // and as a result it sends us to the homepage. So there are our 2 buy milk, buy beer, there is our homepage title. So what we need to do is try and avoid this annotation. And the way we're going to do that is by URL encoding the dot. So I'm going to put a %2e, %2e instead of a dot. So a %2e is the URL encoding of a dot. Now, if I was to do that, I get outside of the public directory. So now I am running outside of the public directory in the application or in the file system that this application is running from. And this is currently, in fact, a Docker image running or a Docker container running on my local machine. So from here, what can I do? Well, perhaps I can grab this package JSON. There we go. I can see all the other direct dependencies which have been deployed with this application. Maybe I can go even further. Let's copy this. Let's go all the way back up to my root. I assume it's somewhere like that. If you cd ... into your root, you get a root. And let's grab something cliche, the etc password file. There we go. There's the etc password of my Docker container. So when we hack into this environment, I can now, as an attacker, start getting more information and perhaps even try and find a new way in to get sensitive information. So that's my 5 minutes. I hope you enjoyed that session.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that one, Si. I hope you all understood that at the same level that I did, just got all of that perfectly. Does anyone have a question for Simon at all out there?
I have a comment to make that I'm completely terrified of him now, and I'm going to be shutting my computer down and plugging it.
So the wonderful thing about hacking, I have a big Java background and I've only been in security for the last 2 years. One of the amazing things about hacking is it's extremely easy to hack once you know how. And when to find out how is extremely easy because plenty of people have done it in the past and you just follow their lead. So this is for example, the Equifax hack on Apache struts. It's just a header that you need to send as part of any kind of HTTP request to a vulnerable endpoint. And the information that you need in that header is publicly available in GitHub. So the problem here is there's 2 ways you can kind of like hack. One is with known vulnerabilities, so you have known hacks, and the other is kind of like, if you wanted to target someone, then you have to try and work out what they're using and try and find a vulnerability. But a really common way is looking at what is common across many, many different applications and trying to find that slowest wildebeest in the herd, as it were, and try and opportunistically find something that you can break into. So there's a lot of smart people in the kind of like security hacking industry. I'm certainly not one of them. It's a very opportunistic place to be able to get this data from as well.
Great, thanks, Si. Really appreciate that, mate. Okay, so again, if anyone's got any feedback, then please do feel free to pop it on the form. And next we have Aslam Osman speaking about Meet a Mentor, I believe. So Aslam.
Hi, Barry. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. So quick introduction to myself. I'm Aslam Osman. I work as a specialist interim IT manager and consultant. Most recently, I was Group Corporate Head of IT at Associated British Foods, which is the parent company of Primark. And I'm currently working as a CIO advisory consultant for a public sector organisation in London. Barry and Helen asked me to come and talk to you for 5 minutes about mentoring. So I'll just give you a little overview about what is mentoring and really why I think it's something that you should consider as a real powerful boost to your career. And then I'll just give a little bit of a reflection on my own experience working with Helen and Meet a Mentor. So probably first off, if I quickly explain what is the difference between mentoring and coaching. That's a question I get asked a lot when I first start working with mentees. So coaching tends to be more performance driven. So where someone is looking to improve a specific area of competence or performance, often through changing behaviours. So it can often be linked to leadership development, for example, or managerial development. And coaching involves a lot of self-reflection. So the coach is trying to help the coachee work out the answers for themselves. And that ultimately leads to more accountability and hopefully more of a successful outcome. Mentoring, in contrast, tends to be more of a long-term relationship and an ongoing dialogue. So it tends to be focused a bit more on your career holistically. So it's not specifically talking about your current job. And the mentor can be more directive compared to a coach. So and give specific advice. So those are probably the main differences between mentoring and coaching. So why is mentoring so powerful? Why do I think it's so important? A lot of research has shown that mentoring can be a really positive influence on your career development. It can lead to greater success in terms of promotions, job opportunities, or increased pay. And because of the longer term nature of mentoring, that ongoing dialogue, it can really help contribute towards developing more of a personal growth mindset and a learning attitude, which again can be a really powerful factor in your long-term development and your career progression. If you think about technology specifically, with the dizzying pace of tech, new technologies emerging, new skill sets, completely new careers coming along, it can be quite difficult to navigate oneself through your career development. And a good mentor can help you work out potential career paths with you and help you to hone in on what inspires you in your life, in your career, and work through sometimes some quite differing options you may have in terms of your career and your progression. And that can also involve helping to identify specific career goals for yourself. On a more personal front, and maybe of a more day-to-day basis, mentor can act as a confidant, so someone you can share some of your concerns with, some of your troubles. If something you're a bit worried about at work, you're not sure how to do something, you've got a bit of a difficult situation, a mentor can act as that good sounding board. Someone external to your organisation can give you that, outside or third party perspective compared to one of your colleagues or someone in your current organisation. It can also be, a mentor can also act as a good sounding board for your ideas. So, you may have a big presentation to deliver. You may have a new prototype you've been developing, you want to run by somebody or give them a demo. And that can be, again, a safe way to practice some of your ideas or run your ideas by somebody else. I guess one of the longer term benefits of mentoring is really around improving your confidence. So you think about all the kinds of things I just described around career progression, that can have a real boost, because a good mentor can act as a role model for you, and normally a mentor will be more senior to yourself, so they can be a role model in your own personal development, and I guess signpost you to the kind of behaviours you might want to model yourself. And finally, a good mentor can introduce you to other opportunities. They can help with networking, they can introduce you to other people, and introduce you to other job opportunities. So there's a real great benefit, in my opinion and in my experience, to mentoring and developing one's career. In terms of my experience with Meet a Mentor, I first met Barry and Helen about 2 years ago. And I was actually looking for a mentor myself. I was looking for someone who was a senior IT leader who can mentor me and help me in my development. And unfortunately, we couldn't really find the right kind of person to mentor me at the time. And then Helen said to me, "Have you thought about becoming a mentor?" I said, "Actually, no, I haven't." But I thought, oh, why not? Let's give it a go. And since then, I've mentored about 10 people over the last couple of years, and they've ranged from people very early on in their careers, new graduates, all the way through to people who work in a sort of director level. It's been really good fun. I've personally learned a lot myself being a mentor through this organisation. Just give you an illustration, some of the people I'm working with at the moment is one young guy who's a cybersecurity startup founder. I'm mentoring one young person who's a data scientist, and I'm mentoring somebody who is a sort of VP level of product management. And those areas, product management, data science and startups, I don't really have that much experience in. So they're actually helping me as well as me being able to help them. So it's very fulfilling and very rewarding. And I've had some really lovely feedback as well through some of the things Barry and Helen have put on, like the speed mentoring events. I had a piece of feedback from somebody who I only spoke to for 10 minutes, and he said, you know, you gave me some brilliant advice, which is already helping to change my career. And the more sort of long-term mentoring, again, I've had sort of really positive feedback, but it is a very much a two-way relationship. So yeah, a very rewarding experience. And just probably finally, you know, a shout out really to Barry and Helen and the Meet and Mentor community. They've now made something, I think, Barry, like 3,000 introductions, or getting on for 3,000 introductions, getting on for 600 mentors. So no matter what your, you know, your skill set or your interest, you know, there's someone out there potentially could be your mentor and you know, be a real boost to your career and your personal development. So that was a really very, very lightning overview of mentoring, the potential benefits to your career and my experience of Meet a Mentor. Does anyone have any questions for me? No questions?
No questions. I think you're safe there. I think you're safe. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments, or anyone that's been involved in mentoring that's got any contrasting or complementary views there?
I've got a quick question. In terms of when mentoring relationships as a mentee or a mentor, when you feel like they don't work, what are the kind of like signs of that? Because obviously, you know, it's important to have that good bond with the other connection. How do you best go about that, and how would you recommend to kind of like fix that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Simon. I think a lot of it comes down to chemistry, and you'll know fairly soon, I think, if that person is the right kind of mentor for you. The mentees I've had where I didn't quite, or the mentoring relationship didn't quite work, it was fairly noticeable after one or two meetings. Another sign tends to be that when you have the meetings, the other person doesn't seem quite so engaged or hasn't really followed up on some of the things that you raised before. Conversely, some of the new people I've started working with recently, you know, you can really see their enthusiasm when, you know, in between meetings, they're following up on all the kind of things I've suggested. So it's fairly clear, but it can also work two ways. Sometimes, you know, I'm not the right mentor for them, or they might not be the right kind of mentor for me. It's not a personal thing. It's just sometimes you just hit it off. Sometimes it's chemistry or natural rapport.
Thanks, Aslam. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, and everyone here is obviously welcome to sign up. It's all completely free. I can't take any of the credit, really. It's all Helen. I don't know if Helen's disappeared. I can't see her on here anymore, Dom.
Yeah, her Zoom has crashed.
Oh,
she can't get back on.
Classic. But yeah, so it's all Helen's doing. She runs it. She spends her pretty much her whole day introducing people. If she can't find mentors in the network, she generally tries to go outside of her network and that kind of thing. So yes, approaching 3,000, just over 2,750 now. So yeah, anyone's free and welcome to sign up. And yeah, it's lovely to hear about the benefits you've had from the other side, Aslam. I think as a mentor as well as just as a mentee, it's yeah, great to hear that side of it as well.
Can I just say one thing, Barry? Aslam, I loved when you said that it was kind of there was a symbiotic relationship to it as well, that you learn stuff from the people you were mentoring, as well as, you know, your mentoring skills are growing. It's a lovely, I think, relationship when it works well and the chemistry is right. And I think that is a huge factor to it.
Cool. Yeah, I think sometimes, particularly more with maybe coaching relationships, there can be that power dynamic where you've got someone quite senior and someone more junior. I think that a good mentoring relationship, as I said, is a two-way thing. And I've been really excited about some of the things I've learned. I've actually got a mentoring session at 3 o'clock today with my startup founder mentee, which I'm really looking forward to. So yeah, I definitely encourage all of you to consider it and contact Helen, because she's really good at matching people up with the right kind of mentor.
Lovely.
Cool,
great. Thanks, Aslam. Thanks, Mag. Okay, Karsten, are you a co-host? I don't know if you are. I might need to upgrade you. Karsten, are you able to screen share at the moment?
Not yet.
No, okay.
And no, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Right, you should be able to now. Is that done?
Wonderful, yes.
Real. All right, I'll let you go then.
So can you see my screen here? Okay, can you hear me okay? So let me get started. So today I want to tell you about how Javers gives you easy audit logs in Java. You'll find the slides, the sample code, and how to get to my newsletter if you type in this URL, or you just take a picture of this QR code with your phone. I'll show this slide again at the very end. So I'm going to move away from 3, 2, as this is my cat Max, by the way. He's now showing up second time. It's becoming a habit. So let me move on and say, have you ever suffered from changed data in an application and couldn't get the old data back? Well, that sucked, right? Now you can't keep the world from changing, and you can't keep the, oops, sorry, gotta get my cat off here. Oh. Okay, I'm back. So you can't keep the world from changing, and you can't keep people from doing mistakes. But there's one thing what your application can do, and that is it can show an audit log of who changed what, when, how to your users. So let me tell you a little story, because Krystian, I do like stories. So a customer calls you and says he didn't get any emails. And so you're looking at the email address and you realize, well, the email address is fine. So what do you usually do? Well, you usually just shrug and say, well, you know, check your spam folder. Well, usually is over. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. What a lovely singing voice. So the audit log comes to the rescue and it shows you who changed what, when, how. So this is what an audit log looks like. There's a lot on that screen, so let me guide you. We are comparing two versions on the screen. We are seeing the version information at the top, old information on the right, new information on the left. The actual data, customer data in this case, is below, and we're highlighting the changed version, changed data in red. And if you look closely, then you see why Mr. John Snow didn't get an email, because he spells his first name without an H, but in our systems, he initially had an H. So the reason why John Snow didn't get an email is because we had his email address wrong initially, and the audit log showed us. So this is brilliant, and so how can we get that in Java? Well, let's put together a to-do list of what it takes. So we start with the front end, and we just seen we need to compare two different versions. We need to probably show all versions, and we need to show a single version. So on the back end, we need to create a version in the first place, and then we need to query the existing versions, and we need to compare two versions. So we look at that to-do list and we realize, well, this is quite hard, but fortunately for us, Javers comes to the rescue. So here we are with Javers. And what does Javers do for us? It gives us easy audit logs in Java. So what is that magical thing? Well, first of all, it's an open source project under the Apache license, so everybody can use it. When you create a version with Javers, it saves a POJO graph as JSON in the database. So POJO graph means that if you have POJOs inside your POJOs, you know, nested objects, they get all stored away, and you only will ever have 4 fixed tables. So no new tables just because you version something new here. It supports relational or MongoDB databases. Now, when you query versions, Javers gives you a query language and returns version information for you. And finally, when you compare versions, then POJO calculates the difference, computes the difference between your POJOs. So now that's all fine and dandy, but how does the creating of a version, you know, the key piece here, how does that fit into our Java applications? Well, how do our Java applications usually look like? Well, we have a business layer, a persistence layer, and we've got a data store. And so when we want to save data, create or update, then we receive a DTO, a data transfer object from the outside world. And then we validate that. We can prepare it for saving. We actually do save it, and then it ends up in the database. And, you know, in our app tables. And now we're done. And so we're jumping back and we're nearly done, but this is when we take a detour, because now at this point in time, we're saying we're creating a version. We've got the data stashed away. We know it's valid. And so now we create a version. And Javers writes that to the database into its own table, not into our app table, into its own tables. So, and now we're done. And fini. So let me highlight two important things here. When we create a version, I chose here to version the existing DTOs. So that's my recommendation. Javers doesn't tell you, I do. On the other hand, when Javers writes data to the database, it bypasses our persistence layer, and that's built in. You can't do anything about it. So bypassing the persistence layer reduces complexity, versioning the existing DTOs reduces code duplication. So now let's look at our to-do list, and we version DTO. So let's start with the backend and create version. We customize the DTOs for the versioning, but otherwise create version is generic, so check. When we query versions, it's generic as well, and we receive version information, so we're good there too. And when we compare two versions, you know, that's the most complicated part. You know, we need to make sure that we count changes correctly, but compare versions gives us diff of our DTOs. So that's wonderful too. Now let's jump over to the front end, show all version. That's a new component, but we only show generic version information, so we have it in there once. When we show one version, we can reuse the UI we already have. We have the same DTOs and put version information on top. And then finally, when we compare two versions, that's the most complicated because we need to extend the UI to show differences. But after all that, if we undo all that, then yep, we're done. We actually finished all our to-dos. So let's recap. An audit log shows you who changed what, when, how. We want to show these audit logs to our users. Audit logs are easier in Java with Javers because we bypass the persistence layer, which reduces complexity. We version the existing DTOs, which reduces code duplication, and Javers computes the existing diff of the DTOs for us, which saves us from writing code. And so we're looking at that and realize, yep, we've done it. We can build this screen in Java, which means celebrations are in order. Yay, fireworks on a Friday. Wonderful. So Javers gives you easy audit logs in Java, and you can find the slides code and my newsletter here at this URL. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karsten. Appreciate that. So a cat and a dog making an appearance this week. Does anyone have any questions then for Karsten on his presentation? Good, you got away with it? I don't see any questions coming through, so there you go. Answered everyone's question with that. Obviously, you can use the chat as well if you do have any questions for Karsten afterwards. And Dom, thank you. I can see you've just put the feedback form up there again. So please do use feedback. So that brings the session to an end, the Lightning Talk session to an end, I should say. I can see we've had loads of feedback, so thank you so much. About 25 separate bits of feedback. So I'll forward that on to everyone this afternoon, all the speakers. Thank you so much to all the speakers that have got involved. So for this part, this was actually Trisha G's idea a few sessions ago, that since we had everyone here, we could use this as an opportunity to speak to some experienced speakers and use it as a way to try and, there's obviously a lot of people on this call at this session, and hopefully a bunch of you that haven't spoken have been tempted to get into it and give it a go. I know Kabir, we've got you on the call. That was you about a month ago. We're tempted to, and then a few weeks later gave your first one. So this is really for anyone out there that is that maybe has spoken internally and not yet gone on to conference speaking or meetup speaking and is tempted or is just curious to know what it's about and why they should do it. So we have with us Simon Maple, who you've obviously seen give a very lightning talk, and Martin Verberg as well. So welcome, Simon, Martin. If anyone has any questions, you feel free to put it in the chat window or just unmute your mic and ask away. I've got a few things that I would that I'm going to start with. So for either of you, I think the big thing is that you only really know once you've been a speaker is why should people get started? Why should they take that horrible first step on stage? What's the benefits? How can it change your career?
Oh, great question. The more senior you get in technology as a technologist, even if you're an individual contributor as opposed to going down a management path, the better you need to be at people and the better you need to be about communicating. It's all about driving clarity and alignment within your group inside your organization and with external customers and partners and things. So quick bit of background, I'm now the engineering group manager for Java at Microsoft. So I experience this firsthand all the time. Microsoft is a vast organization, and for me to get anything done, I have to coordinate with at least 20 internal teams, make sure I'm aligned with the 15 different strategies that Microsoft as a massive tech holding company is running around. And I don't spend a lot of my time doing technology anymore, if I'm going to be completely honest. I spend a lot of my time doing public presentations and practicing a whole wide range of communication, whether that be in person, not so much these days, verbal, on the phone, on Teams, or whatever the case might be. And my public speaking background has been an enormous benefit in that. Cannot understate how valuable that's been. That's my perspective. How about you, Si?
Yeah, I mean, so from my perspective, it's really helped with my career. Right now I run the dev rel at SNCC. So from my perspective, it's a huge part of my job, and I've been doing this for actually almost 20 years now, since I first joined IBM way back when. It was something that I did because I wanted to do it as well. I think there's a number of reasons why you might do it and want to take that step. First of all, I think it's something that you should definitely want to do, but there could be a number of different reasons as to why you might want to do that. So exactly as Martin said, there's a lot of skills that you will learn when presenting in groups, which you can actually take into your daily work as well. So presenting in front of meetings, if you have presented in an audience in front of hundreds, tens, thousands, whatever the numbers, that confidence of getting up on stage and being able to speak confidently about a topic or to a group is extremely important. So if it's something that you want to kind of like a direction that you want to push your career in, then it's like obviously a core piece of that. But even if it's not, I feel like there's a lot of networking and a lot of the same things that you'll learn that you can apply to other parts of your roles as well.
Can I just add something to that, Barry?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I shared this with a CTO panel I did with Barry recently. I think one of the benefits of doing events like this, public speaking, is a way of differentiating yourself in the job market. Times are really tough at the moment if you're looking for a new job. There's lots of skilled people out there, but how can you make yourself stand out versus some of the competition? Doing things like this, thought leadership, speaking at conferences, is a very powerful differentiator, especially in the technology field. I did an event about a year ago, just over a year ago, where I presented a webinar, which is about 40 minutes long. I'd never done an event quite like that. And that was through another IT networking organization that's aimed more sort of enterprise level. Indirectly from that, I got 3 job opportunities, one of which is the current consulting assignment I'm doing at the moment. Another one was an interview for an IT director role for a quite well-known national retailer. You know, no matter what your level, doing these kinds of things can really help with your career. And I think taking that first step, you know, is the hardest. Once you've done it once and got a bit of practice, it becomes easier. And I've been doing it for years. I still get a little bit nervous doing these things, but it does become more natural over time.
Yeah, it's something we hear a lot, the getting direct job offers as well. Obviously, working in recruitment, it comes up. But we had Maria Gutierrez on, who's the engineering director, or head of engineering at Intercom. And she said that she got her first few jobs like years and years ago. And since then, the last 4, 5, 6 jobs have come directly from events that she's given. People have seen her speak and approached her afterwards. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it just seems to happen a lot. Okay, so for you more experienced speakers, then we get typically 2 main hurdles. I'm spending my time trying to drag people into this and force them to give their first presentation quite a bit. And the 2 main reasons that we have that people don't speak are firstly around topic choice, and secondly around nerves. So for somebody sitting there that's saying, "Oh, I don't think I've got anything interesting to talk about," have Martin, Simon, Aslam, have you got any ideas or advice for what they should do, what direction to go in with it?
So for me, I mean, I've heard Martin speak many times about you know, a whole bunch of topics that I really don't want to know about, and so you know, I think even if you have topics that you don't want to speak about, I think it's still great to, no, I'm joking, trolling Martin live. No, I mean, I think everyone's one step ahead of someone else, right? That's why we have mentees and mentors at every single level, and the most junior new person in a role can still be a mentor to someone else, and we can teach people, and we can teach, you know, ourselves from 6 months ago how to help ourselves to get to that stage. So everyone always has something to talk about, and everyone always has someone to teach something to teach someone else. You just need to recognize, you know, there is an audience for that. I think if we was to look at some of the big conferences, some of the big meetups that get, you know, large numbers of audience, perhaps that might not be your stage currently, but even still, you know, you should never underestimate yourself personally and how much you know next to other people, because it always feels like everyone else is, you know, so much smarter and so much brighter and knows so much more than you, but there are plenty of things you will know that the next person won't. So I think I'm happy to I'll give way to others who can cover some of the other topics, but I feel like this topic comes up more and more with writing as well. You know, I'm going to write a blog. I've got nothing to blog about. It's you know, it's very, very similar points of view. And I'm sure if you just chat to someone and someone says, "Oh, I didn't know that," that's a small thing that you can blog about and start, and it builds up and grows like that as well.
You can always speak about your learning journey. I mean, my series of talks is called The Diabolical Developer's Guide to ... And I'm like, hey, I need to go learn Kubernetes. So I go write a talk called The Diabolical Developer's Guide to Kubernetes. And I am sure as heck not a Kubernetes expert, but I'm just documenting in my talk my learning experiences. And I actually document how awful I found it, how awkward I found it, how, you know, the mishmash of commands really confused me, how there was a lack of tooling, so on and so forth. And as you can imagine, half the audience who were like me and new to Kubernetes were like, this is really valuable, right? And the other half of the audience who were more experienced Kubernetes practitioners were throwing me all sorts of well-meaning advice, which was well received. But that talk wasn't ready for them, right? The talk I was giving was a talk for fellow beginners like me. So as long as you know your audience, and often your audience can be the beginner audience just like you, then just, you know, get into the habit at work of documenting any new thing that you do, right? You pick up a new tool, you pick up a new programming language, you pick up a new framework or library, just start jotting notes down about it. And before you know it, that will turn into either a piece of writing or a story you can tell.
Yeah, and I think just echoing what Simon and Martin are saying, that everyone has got a personal story to tell or a personal perspective. If you look at LinkedIn, for example, and the kind of people who have large followings, they're not necessarily always experts in a particular field, or, you know, the world's greatest experts, but what they do have is, you know, an individual perspective on things that are happening in their industry, for example. And I think, you know, if that's a good place to start, you know, what do I think? You know, what kind of story do I have to tell? And it doesn't have to be something really dramatic, but I think once you start, then that creates a bit of interest, and people are often, you know, very open to listening to new people and their perspectives. I think Barry also asked about nerves, and you know, if you think back to Steve Jobs, you know, who is often held as, you know, a really fantastic public speaker. He used to rehearse like crazy for his keynote speeches. He might spend 100 hours or more, you know, practicing. I'm not saying you need to do that for a 5-minute talk, but, you know, just before I came on today, I ran through my, although I didn't have any slides, so maybe you thought it was a bit more freeform than expected, but I ran through my what I was going to talk about 5 or 6 times, just to kind of get the flow in my head of what I was going to talk about and a couple of the points that I wanted to highlight. So practice is part of it, and overcoming your nerves. Yeah, I think once you've done it a couple of times, because it does feel a little bit unnatural sometimes when you're, especially now doing it in front of a screen. Sometimes you get a bit of lag with the technology. It's a bit different to doing it in front of a room full of people. But it's just practice makes perfect, and everyone's got to start somewhere. Even Steve Jobs was a beginner one day.
So true, so true. And we hear this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, Trisha is probably the best practitioner of being disciplined about delivering talks that I've ever seen in the Java industry anyway. So if you want tips, definitely go reach out to her directly. She'll give you all the tips and tricks on how to properly prepare. Has certainly put myself to shame on a number of occasions where I've ad-libbed it a little bit too close to the line. Yeah. I
remember it used to kill me going to the unconferences and you guys, because I'm not obviously a public speaker, but do the openings. But you'd always have Simon and Martin there writing their presentation, writing their keynote that they were about to give in 5 or 10 minutes. And it stressed me out more than it stressed you out.
Yeah, do not do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Do not do that.
The one thing I'll just say about nerves is I think nerves are actually a good thing in terms of, first of all, it means you care about what you're doing. I think the reasons why you don't necessarily have nerves is because you've either done something so many times that you are so confident that it's going to go well that you know you don't need to feel nervous. But if you don't have nerves, you know, it's most likely something that you don't care about. And I think it's really good to actually embrace that. Use those nerves to kind of like pump yourself up a little bit and get ready for it. I think a good way, you know, if you do have nerves, it's first of all completely natural. You're not anything different to anyone else in the world, really. So I would say just be probably very mindful of the different venues that you might want to go to. Something like this is a great place to start, or, you know, maybe at the LJC doing a 5-minute talk there as well, because it's about feeling comfortable in a safe space. And I think that's one of the key things in which you can grow. Also, you know, maybe speaking up in some of the larger meetings or meetings at work as well. Maybe doing a couple of minutes to some of your, like in an end of sprint demo or whatever it is, to actually give yourself a little bit of practice. And it's realistically absolutely no different to that, but you may be on a stage instead of at a table, and it's a little bit of mind games as well, and trying to talk yourself down sometimes, and knowing that, you know what, it is going to be okay. If it goes bad, no one's going to care more than you, and you'll have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other times, if you choose to want to continue to do it, to get better. I know my first presentations were absolutely dreadful and awful, and as me looking back on it, and that's fine. It's fine. No one expects you to jump in as your first presentations and you know, present like an experienced presenter, because you're not an experienced presenter. So knowing the audience and being safe and comfortable in that is probably some of the biggest things that will help.
There's some really good tips there from Simon. I think another thing that you can do is record yourself. I mentioned the webinar that I did last year, and the organisers gave me a recording afterwards, and I just couldn't stand hearing my own voice. It sounded terrible. I don't know what you think about my voice at the moment, but by recording yourself, you're effectively putting yourself in the shoes of the audience. So, you know, what does my voice sound like? What's my projection of my voice? What's my body language like? You know, am I looking in the right direction? Am I talking downwards? Am I talking upwards? You know, it's just little things like that that you know, if you can do well, just make it a bit more engaging as a speaker. So yeah, I would certainly suggest practice recording yourself.
You know, it's funny with the whole recording yourself thing. So obviously we open the events, they all go out on YouTube. And as soon as they come in, we watch them. So straight away, it's me talking. And at first, yeah, exactly that. And so I've heard so many people say similar. They start watching themselves and they can't get past a minute because it's so awkward. And it was certainly the same for me. Now it feels like someone else. I'm watching, it's like I'm watching a video of someone else. So I do think you very quickly get accustomed to watching yourself, and you see past the awkward part of it, and you see to just, you know, the bits, the improvements that you could make and things. So I think it's a really good thing to suggest. Simon, I just wanted to come back to you on something you said there. You said when you were talking about the topic choice, speak about those things that you know more about than others. And I was going to ask you, how do you know what you know more about than others? How do you know those bits that you're interested in that you perhaps are further along than other people that they would be interested in?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think anything whereby you yourself have a eureka moment is typically something that you didn't know before. So there's two things, right? There's understanding what you've learned from a previous you, and almost like comparing yourself back to, so you can understand, oh, actually, yeah, would I have been able to do this 2 months ago, 3 months ago? There's that, but there's also just discussions with other people. So, you know, have a coffee, or while you're having a coffee, maybe over Zoom these days, or at the remote virtual water cooler, as you chat to people and as you help people, whatever people find interesting or useful from those kind of conversations as well. You know, we help each other all the time in teams. Whenever you find those things whereby you are actually helping people, think, are there other people in the team or wider than this team that could also benefit? You know, typically from a DevRel point of view, one of the things we do, we focus on is the problem solution style post. So what are people having problems with, and what are people asking questions about, and how can we help them? So we're almost seeking that out. But you can turn it the other way around, where in general life, okay, how am I helping people more naturally? So what am I doing through my own experience, helping people with that? So I think that is the one of the easiest ways, I think, of doing it. Maybe even ask people closest to you, you know, what is it that I can maybe help you with, or learn or teach others? And then people will actually say, oh, you know what, I feel you're really strong on X or Y. And that's getting feedback from others if you can't yourself see it as well, is a really good way of doing that.
That's an awesome idea. I'm gonna create a bunch of questions, I think, that we can give people that they could ask their teams and say, you know, exactly some of those questions. You know, what am I awesome at, and what would you look to me for, and that, what have I helped you with in the past? Because I think that might just help trigger some things if they get the same thing from 3 or 4 people. Yeah, some really good advice. Martin, Aslam, would you add anything to that, or do you think that sort of covered it?
It's covered it well for me.
Okay, so one other thing that we get quite often, to what extent do you write your talk out in full, so that you're completely prepared with it, you know every word of everything that you're going to say, all the way back to just have a spine of things, or you just, you know, create the presentation as you turn up to the event or something like that? How do you kind of, how do you fit on that scale?
I think it's...
I always structure my talks in the same way. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it depends on the audience and the context and how interactive you want to make it. I think the main thing is to structure your story. So, you know, you have a beginning, a middle, an end. Personally, I veered from the writing down the whole thing. So the webinar I mentioned, that was about 40 minutes. That's a long time to speak. So I had about 30 slides. I basically scripted almost the entire thing for each slide. The panel we did last week, Barry, that was very freeform, so I probably had a list of about 3 things I was going to say. I think the sort of more high profile it is, obviously the more you want to structure it and prepare and practice. Would you like to add to that, Martin?
Yeah, no, echo similar thing. So I always go by the rule of tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. And the chunky bit is telling them what you're going to tell them. Most humans can only walk away with between 3 and 5 points out of a talk in their heads. So it's pretty critical that you structure your talk with kind of 3 major takeaways as a good judgment number to go by. So I just build that spine into my talk with good old section headings and section headers. And I tend to change up, and this is the difference between being, I guess, an experienced speaker and someone who hasn't got as much experience. Is that the more experience you get, the more you want to change the same talk every time you deliver it, right? So quite often the words are different. You may swap around some of the flow. You will adjust to the audience, as Aslam mentioned, etc. But the spine always remains the same. So yeah, I usually split it up into about 1/10 telling them what I'm going to tell them, about 80% telling them what they need to know, and then 10% at the end kind of recapping what I've just told them.
I think that's all really good advice. I think I'd say for me to give advice for people who are just kind of like starting up and wanting to get into speaking, there's a couple of things that I'd say. I think scripting is always bad, whether you're a new speaker or an experienced speaker. I think having a kind of like more of a free form approach to it is better in the delivery. You feel more confident doing it because you don't feel nervous trying to remember what the script is. But the way I would go about this is I would say, first of all, use your slides. I think it's important to have slides as a new speaker as well. Use your slides as your guide and allow that to take you through the session. Keep your slides fairly brief and I would say simple enough so that when you look at it, you know what the maybe 1, 2, 3 key things you want to say in that slide. So don't necessarily have too many words or too much information in there, but just think, right, as soon as I see that slide, I've got 3 things I need to say. First of all, and then you go into more of an ad lib. You know exactly what you want to say, maybe not the exact words, but you know the messages you're trying to put through. And then the other thing is, and this may slightly conflict with what I just said, but the other good practice is to have 1 message per slide. So if there's one takeaway really per slide. So you may want to say, a few things, but there's 1 takeaway per slide. And that will allow you, there's a number of people who also talked about stories and taking people on journeys. This will allow you to then take people on that journey in a more self-prescribed way because the slides are really helping you through that.
Yeah, I think slides can be really helpful. I think what you should try and avoid is writing on the slide what you're going to say, so you end up reading the slide because it's a real turn off for the audience. That's death by PowerPoint. I think as Simon was saying, you want some prompts on there. What I find works quite well is to have a picture, and then just 2 or 3 words, and that's the prompt to me. So I've practiced the presentation beforehand, but I've still got something to refer to there that I can use to jog my memory in case I've forgotten what it is. Yeah, in general, when you're using slides, fewer words, more pictures, basically. And people have very short attention spans these days. So more, Simon said, you can make it more natural and interactive and engaging. The audience will find that more rewarding.
Yeah, we have had that. Another speaker said that. I didn't realize that for me, a presentation was always something that put it across to the audience. But we had another speaker say that they only use slides so that it's to keep them on course. Like the slides are more for them to, as Simon was saying, to keep them knowing what they're going to present rather than to be the kind of the main thing to talk to, as you say, with either the picture or something like that. I think it's really, really important. Okay, guys, that is all of my questions. I'll leave it. Just, does anyone have any questions for Aslam, Martin, Simon, or anything at all that they'd like to ask? Again, just unmute your mic and I can invite you in.
Yeah, I got a question. When you guys do screencasts or something, or podcasts where you type on your keyboard, what do you think you should use for a microphone then? A headset or something on a microphone stand, on a microphone arm, so that doesn't pick up all the background noise? What works best in your experience?
professional boom mic. Can't go past it. Yeah, so yeah, see, Simon's got one as well. If you're really serious about the stuff, you've got to go buy the professional or semi-professional gear. And so you'll have mics which you hang up from an arm or hang on a stand where it doesn't pick up vibrations or other noise. We can set the gain individually on audio channels and a whole bunch of other sound engineering stuff, which I won't bother getting into right now. But unfortunately, yeah, you need to invest in some really good headphones and a high quality microphone.
I did a really stupid thing and bought a, this is a Keytronic K2, which is, and it's a blue one as well. So it's extremely clicky keyboard, which I love personally. But then of course everyone went virtual and I'm like on Zooms all the time now, clicking on this really noisy keyboard. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the best for screencasts and things like that. But you know, a more silent keyboard and definitely, yeah, definitely a boom mic is good, particularly, you know, for me, because I've got like a stand-up desk. So my desk area is just from a point of view of having some real estate on the desk. If you want to put notes and other things which you want to refer to, having a mic that you can kind of like just move and be hands free, irrespective of which kind of like, you know, monitor I'm going for and things like that. That all really helps. Plus, if you're doing webinars and doing recordings, it's just very, very useful to have a high quality mic as well for, you know, eliminating background sound of like two kids and okay, the dog's in the room this time around, but the dog's normally outside, and all those kind of things. You know, having a good setup definitely helps.
I would definitely agree with that, and I just add, if you can't go to the expense of a mic like Simon and Martin have, you know, even a lapel mic can really help. Yeah, that's a good piece of advice.
Great, thanks.
And get a cat.
Does anyone else have any questions at all for the panel? I think we might be there. Okay,